sitting in for Rush Limbaugh, Michael Medved.
And what a pleasure for me to be here. Rush needed to take a personal day, and I have the opportunity to sit in for Rush from the Great Northwest, from mighty 570 KVI in Seattle. There's sort of an interesting story about how I came to be sitting here and sitting in behind the mobile golden EIB microphone today, but we'll get to that later. First of all, are we going to go to war with Iraq? I mean, is that really coming down? The answer, nah, it's not. I mean, I think what we're dealing with right now is another feeding of Saddam Hussein's monstrous ego. But I'll tell you one thing, and it really does have to be observed. If you saw Newt Gingrich and if you saw Trent Lott speaking unequivocally, forcefully in support of the President of the United States and staring down this thug, this creep, Saddam Hussein, you had to be proud of them. And yeah, I'm going to say it. Am I allowed to be partisan? I think I'm allowed to be partisan. I'm going to say it. Take a comparison between the attitude of unequivocal support, strengthening the president's backbone by Trent Lott, Senate Majority Leader, and by Newt Gingrich, Speaker of the House of Representatives. Compare that to the role of Tom Foley, former Speaker of the House, or of Senator George Mitchell, former Senate Majority Leader, during a much more serious crisis with Saddam Hussein. Oh, when? Back in 1992, when George Bush had to fight every inch of the way to get congressional approval for his policy. It's quite a contrast. Meanwhile, today is election day. Not today, tomorrow is election day, but there are elections around the country. We're going to be talking about that. The number here at the EIB Radio Network, Michael Medved sitting in for Rush Limbaugh, 1-800-282-2882. And President Clinton spent yesterday, despite his hoarseness, campaigning for various Democrats. And are you surprised? He said some really, to me, rather shocking things. He's campaigning particularly in the one congressional race that is up tomorrow, this in Staten Island. There's a district in Staten Island, New York, then also a few neighborhoods in Brooklyn are included in that congressional district. This, remember, the congressional seat that had been held by Susan Molinari. She gave it up to end up with a job, at least for the time being, on CBS News. And President Clinton came into Staten Island to campaign for the the Democratic candidate, Eric Vitaliano. And listen to what President Clinton said. This is part of what he said while campaigning for the Democratic candidate for Congress. Why has the other party spent all this money? Because they are still trying to implement the contract on America. That's what President Clinton said. Because they have opposed every single thing that we've tried to do that has moved this country forward in the last 5 years. Can you imagine? What do you call a budget deal? Wasn't this supposed to be the era of bipartisanship? We had solved it. And here he says the Republicans have opposed every single thing? Come on. And they attacks the contract on America after he, leader of the free world, President Bill Clinton, has incorporated 6 of the 10 contract items as his own policy. Is it possible that President Clinton has no shame? By the way, you know the best evidence of that I saw? He went to the Oscar Mayer Elementary School in Chicago, Illinois, last week. And he posed for a big picture in front of a huge blackboard. And the way the picture was captioned in the New York Times, and I love it, is President Clinton touts his formula for success. And what does it have right behind him? Huge words, 3 huge words. It has standards plus accountability equals excellence. This is President Bill Clinton's formula for success? Standards? What standards? Accountability? Remember, this is the guy, the buck never got here. Meanwhile, President Clinton also campaigned for Ruth Messenger, who is the doomed Democratic candidate for mayor in New York City. And he said he did that because when his campaign for president was going badly back in 1992, Ruth Messenger stood by him, so he was coming to stand by her to give her a little bit of bucking up for the drubbing she's going to get tomorrow from Rudy Giuliani, the mayor of New York. But he couldn't resist, even though he's not running for anything right now, or at least not theoretically, he couldn't resist saying what he would do if he were mayor of New York. President Clinton, standing next to Ruth Messenger, Democratic candidate, said, "I say to you, I believe if I were mayor of New York City, I would say my first three priorities are, I'm going to get the unemployment rates down to the national level. I'm going to fix the schools." And listen to this one. "And I'm going to give these kids something to do after school to keep them out of trouble." Doesn't it say a great deal about the liberal mindset? One of his top three priorities for New York is giving kids something to do after school. And you understand why people worry about what we call the nanny state? Listen, this election is more important than a lot of people think. It's just a series of local elections, mayor of New York City, a congressional seat in Staten Island. We have a mayor's race here in Seattle. We have some very key ballot propositions here in the state of Washington. There is, of course, the governor's race in New Jersey, the governor's race in the state of Virginia. The reason all of this is important is because people will look at this as indicative of a trend. That's why Bill Clinton's getting so involved with this campaign. If the Republicans go 4 for 4, if they win all 4 of the big races, if they win the congressional seat, if they win for governor of Virginia, where they're running well ahead, the Republican candidate for governor, Gilmore, is running in the latest poll 12 points ahead of his Democratic opponent. If they win for governor of New Jersey with Christine Todd Whitman and win as for mayor of New York City, everyone will look at this as an indication that the Democrats are demoralized and going down. Because part of the reason that they've been handicapped in all of these elections, they have not been able to raise the kind of money and pump in the kind of money that the Republicans have been able to do. And when people are looking for investing for PACs, political action committees, for the next round of elections, the crucial elections in 1998, where the Democrats are going to try to retake the House of Representatives, this could be a very important message of Republican strength. That's why, for any of you ditto heads who might be out there in the state of New Jersey, look, I don't have any great love or admiration for Christine Todd Whitman. On a lot of social issues, she is ultra-liberal. Like President Clinton, she defends partial birth abortion. She is an advocate of affirmative action, of quotas, of race preferences. She is an advocate of gay rights. She is not a conservative on social issues. She is more conservative on economic issues. However, you got to look at this election in a context. Maybe you want to punish Christine Todd Whitman, but if McGreevey, the Democrat, wins in New Jersey, it will send a message that Bill Clinton turned it around. People really do love Bill Clinton. There's no problem with this administration. It would be far more constructive for the conservative cause if, as inadequate in many ways as Governor Whitman might be, if she is returned to the governor's mansion in Trenton. By the way, it looks very good for her. The Star Ledger poll, the leading poll in New Jersey, shows that she increased her lead from 4 percentage points to 9 percentage points in the last 4 days. So it looks pretty good for Governor Whitman. Now, here's an interesting point. One of the reasons it looks good is there's a third-party candidate there in New Jersey. He's a Libertarian Party candidate. His name is Murray Sabrin. Now, interestingly, even though most libertarians are very much pro-choice on abortion, Murray Sabrin is more pro-life than either Christine Todd Whitman or Jim McGreevey, her Democratic opponent. At least Mr. Sabrin, the Libertarian candidate, is against partial birth abortion. So what does that mean? That means that when he got into the race and he's raised a lot of money, he was part of the debates in New Jersey, there was a thought that he would take a lot of votes away from Christine Todd Whitman. But you know what the most recent polls show? They show that actually the votes that Sabrin is getting are votes that otherwise would go to the Democrat, to McGreevey. People who don't like Christy Whitman are saying, well, I don't have to vote for McGreevey. I like him even less. I can vote for this guy, Sabrin. And actually, Sabrin is taking more votes from McGreevey than he is from Whitman, helping the Republican. Now, why is this relevant to anything? Well, because Ross Perot, making a big comeback over the weekend with his Reform Party meeting, announced that he personally is going to be leading the charge with his Reform Party to get rid of the Republican majority in the House of Representatives. And when you first read the story, it sounds pretty bad. It says, in an effort to punish Republicans who the Reform Party says have blocked campaign finance reform, party leaders are going to try to shift control of the House to Democrats next year. We can't make a difference. We can make a difference like they won't believe, party founder Ross Perot said Saturday in his first major political appearance since the 96 presidential campaign. They are planning to pick out 40 to 50 of the most vulnerable Republican House seats and to field Reform Party candidates in those districts to bring the Republicans down. Now, what's the relevance here? The relevance is I think this is going to work to the Republicans' advantage, just like this situation with Murray Sabrin, the Libertarian candidate in New Jersey. In the same way that it gives people a chance to vote against the Republicans without going over and voting for the Democrats, what really will happen is people who are disaffected with the Republican side will split their votes. I hope Ross Perot does this. I hope he is totally humiliated and that those of you who gave Rush a tough time way back in 1992 will recognize how right on he was. Isn't it more and more clear as we go along that Mr. Perot is not a serious, statesman-like political leader? We will be back right after this break on the EIB network. A story about cloning Elvis and about a sex change form in the state of Massachusetts and much more on the Rush Limbaugh Show on the EIB radio network. Michael Medved sitting in from Seattle.
You're listening to the EIB network.
Time for opinions and analysis of the news with Tom Tradip.
Boy, oh boy, the start of a brand new week. Lots of new friends in the house this morning at KRLD in Dallas, KPRC Houston, and many, many other stations affiliated with the Texas State Network, as well as 143 countries around the world along the Armed Forces Radio Network. Nothing would please me more than to tell all of you folks that all's right with the world this morning. And yet, comes now news from Florida that your family dog may be getting more than just a bone from you in the near future. You may need to give your dog a massage. Yes, even dog lovers like me, the guy who brings my Irish setter Buckley to work on occasion, will cringe at the words of Angela Willis, who says she's a licensed dog masseuse.
You start to learn your dog's body, so you're going to know if something pops up that wasn't there the day before, and hopefully if it's something that you need to tend to, you're going to get to your vet sooner than you would have noticed had the dog given you other signs.
Angela says she first became interested in canine massage therapy when she practiced it on her own dog.
I had a really, really hyper puppy that I couldn't touch, and once I started working on him and I saw what it was doing for him, I actually decided that I wanted to do this as a profession.
Naturally, for those of us who see the family dog as a pet, as a means of cheap household security, and of course as the fierce guardian of the backyard from squirrels, Angela Wills gives us, well, the willies. Fortunately, even she concedes not every dog will like massage therapy.
They may not be real keen to it at first, but just like with my Shar-Pei puppy, you kind of have to do it slowly and get them used to it, and then they'll end up loving it.
That's Angela Wills of Sanford, Florida, who is a licensed dog masseuse in the headlines this morning at the Best Paw Forward Dog Training Center. Now, call me foolish, call me irresponsible, but as much as I love my own dog and as much as I totally subscribe to the whole man's best friend creed, unless and until the dog is prepared to give me a massage or go to work to put food on my plate, it will be a chilly day in August, or November in this case, before dog massage comes to our house. Oh, okay, maybe I'll still scratch his belly once in a while, but that's it. And I'm not getting his slippers. For Daybreak USA, I'm Tom Tradup.
Understand, I am the world's most overprotective mother, and proud of it. I have totally childproofed my house. I've put safety latches on the kitchen cabinets, bumpers on the coffee tables, and safety covers on all the outlets. I teach my kids to always look both ways when crossing the street, to always wear a helmet when they're on their bicycles, to always go down slides feet first, not head first. Well, I'd say my kids are protected from everything under the sun.
1 out of 5 Americans will get skin cancer from being out in the sun unprotected. Don't let your child be the one.
Uh-oh.
This message brought to you by the American Academy of Dermatology.
Michael Medved sitting in today for Rush Limbaugh. Rush needed to take a family day. Let me tell you, on a point of personal privilege, a little bit about how I came to be here this morning, because it's somewhat unusual. I had a lecture last night in Wilmington, Delaware. Delaware. And I got done with the lecture, got on an airplane at 11 o'clock, flying from Philadelphia to Las Vegas, where I was supposed to change planes to go home to Seattle. And while I was at the airport in Las Vegas, came this sort of ominous moment where, page for Michael Medved, pick up the white courtesy phone, please. And of course, your immediate thought is something terrible has happened to someone you love. Well, it was my wife, Diane, and she had gotten the message that I would be needed to be on call today, this morning. So, of course, my plane was late getting into Seattle. My plane finally got in around 6 in the morning, and I came over here to Talk Radio 570 KVI and have the opportunity of doing this show. But I want to tell you, wherever I go in the country, one of the first things that people ask me when they meet me is, what's it like to do the Rush Limbaugh show? And let me tell you, you want to know what it's like? It's like driving a borrowed Lamborghini. I mean, it is a great thrill. You've got 950 horsepower under the hood. You've got a production team. Today it's John Booty, broadcast engineer. Of course, the man, the legend, Bo Snerdley, Marie Malsberg, the whole Rush team back in New York today. Here in Seattle, the pride of Hillsdale College, Jeremy Steiner, operating our controls right here at KVI. But, and most of all, the audience. But like any other time you borrow a Lamborghini or a Ferrari or a Rolls Royce, you have to give it back. And more than that, what you really feel is that audience out there. That's the 950 horsepower. And it is a thrill. Speaking of thrills, over the weekend, I participated in a Governor's Summit Conference on the family in Searcy, Arkansas, convened by the governor of Arkansas. No, not that governor of Arkansas. This governor's one you like, Mike Huckabee, Republican governor of Arkansas. He is a fantastic guy. I want to tell you a little bit more about that conference. I've been to a lot of conferences and a lot of meetings on family issues all over the country. Never been to one as strong and as positive and as constructive as this one. It was amazing. It was truly uplifting and remarkable. Star Parker, who's been in the Limbaugh letter, was one of the speakers there, a number of other outstanding speeches, and one of them by the governor himself. What's that? A Republican office holder who can speak movingly in public and not be wooden? Yep. We'll get to that. First, we go to your calls. We go first to Dean in Goshen, Indiana.
Yes, Mike.
Hi, Dean.
Howdy.
Hi. My wife Diane visited Goshen, Indiana one summer when she was in high school.
pretty town.
That's what she said.
Very pretty. Picturesque, nice Indiana town. I had to mention that the football team didn't do too well from the high school here, but they
Can you speak up a little bit, Dean?
It's Rick Meyer's hometown, too. Football quarterback for, I think he's the Bears now.
Uh-huh.
And former Notre Damer. What I was calling you about was to ask you if you saw Ross Perot on Meet the Depressed.
No, I was too busy flying around to different conferences. Tell me about it.
I saw that, and I always thought Ross Perot was a little bit of a Democrat plan or whatever. I had my own theory on him. But Rush was always, or he had that little spoof that says they're going to take me away.
That's a Paul Shanklin spoof.
Yeah, and I was waiting for someone to come out with a net and a straitjacket and take him away. Because I couldn't make heads or tails out of what the guy was saying, and he looked like he was stuttering and eebity like Elmer Fudd. And it was,
but you know what? That's beebity. That's all, folks.
Yeah, exactly. And I was
Let's
sitting
hope.
there, I was going like, well, when's he going to shut up? And Russert was kind of hard on him, but I don't see how that guy can even be a credible candidate.
Do you remember a guy in American politics named Harold Stassen?
No.
Okay, Harold Stassen was in 1948. He was a major candidate for president. He was a governor of Minnesota. He had been a university president. He was a hot young Republican. He ran in 48 and didn't make it. The nomination got won by Tom Dewey. But ever after that, every year after 1948, Harold Stassen ran, and each year his candidacy got to be more and more and more of a joke, until sort of when he was running long into the 70s, it was just Harold Stassen became a byword for this kind of lovable but not entirely all there guy who just ran for president with no chance of winning. I think that's the direction Ross Perot is going.
Minus the lovable part.
Yes, but plus you can add to Ross Perot the, $3 billion.
Yeah, how did he make that, too?
Well, if you read some of the biographies, they suggest that there was some manipulation of governmental power.
Oh, yeah.
You did? You hadn't heard that?
Insider trading. Well, I had heard bits and pieces, but I didn't know for sure on that.
The thing is that the ancient Romans once said that those whom the gods would destroy, they first make mad. And the whole Ross Perot story, look, I'm just glad that he's going to be paying for and fielding some 40 or 50 candidates, because I do think that those candidates are going to help the Republicans in 1998, not hurt the Republicans as Ross intends.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I heard what you were saying. That's good.
Hey, listen, thanks a lot for the call, Dean. I appreciate it.
Day.
Thank you. You too. When we come back, I want to tell you a little bit about, well, one of the few Republicans people haven't been speculating about for the presidency of the United States. Everybody else gets speculated about, but not this one yet. And meanwhile, let's see if we can go very quickly in this last little remaining bit of time before the break to Phil in Downingtown, Pennsylvania. Phil, you're on the EIB radio network.
Mike, it's a pleasure to talk to you. Hey, I had to comment on your 3 things that President Clinton would do if he were the mayor of New York.
Yeah.
2 of those, I think one was to raise the educational standards, and the other was to give the kids something to do after school. How about their homework? I mean, how about a study? Wouldn't that kill 2 birds with 1 stone?
How about what?
Work.
If they studied, yeah, that would be what an interesting point. Yeah, what a novel idea. Phil, I appreciate it. You should write for the president. We'll be right back on the EIB network. Michael Medved sitting in today for Rush Limbaugh on the EIB network. Rush needs to take a personal day today, and I am delighted for the opportunity to be speaking with you, where our numbers, as I think you know, are 1-800-282-2882. One of the things that is sort of striking to me on this day before an election, where the election has at least a good chance of being just a clean Republican sweep, where in all of the four most focused upon races, at the moment, the Republican candidate appears to be ahead. Does that mean it's a sure thing? Does that mean you should stay home and not vote if you live in New Jersey, or if you live in the state of Virginia, or if you live in Staten Island? No, go out and vote by all means. But it sure looks good. It looks encouraging. One of the things that is amazing to me is the level of gloom and doom you get from so many Republicans. Now, part of that comes from talk about this gender gap, which isn't really, we are told, a gender gap. It's a gender canyon. Rush talks about the arousal gap. But let's say that you have someone who is a less arousing candidate than Bill Clinton. Say an Al Gore, I think we can agree less arousing than Bill Clinton, or a Dick Gephardt. Does that gender gap disappear? Well, it doesn't in the polls. Question is, why not? I want to get to that second hour. But meanwhile, another reason for so much Republican malaise, it appears, is that we don't know who the candidate is going to be for the year 2000. I mean, never in our lifetime, in the last 48 years, has the Republican nomination been so absolutely wide open. There must be 20 different people who've been mentioned as candidates for president. And at the moment, with so many different candidates, no one emerging as a clear front runner. Of course, a lot of them look somewhat, they don't look presidential yet. It takes a while to be in the public eye before you look presidential. I want to tell you something. I was at this conference over the weekend, and Governor Mike Huckabee of Arkansas hasn't been mentioned as a presidential possibility yet. Well, he just was. The guy is incredibly good at communicating with people. And I saw him both in a sort of a private group, the kind of small group where Bill Clinton excels, and then saw him speaking to a crowd of more than 2,000 people. I want to tell you, he wowed those folks in a way that I haven't seen a politician do since Ronald Reagan. And I mean it. It was just the communication skills were extraordinary. And why? Because I think Mike Huckabee was talking from his heart, like Ronald Reagan used to, and people could sense it. His background, he was a pastor before he got into elective office. He was elected lieutenant governor of Arkansas. And then, remember when Jim Guy Tucker got convicted in the Whitewater trial? He took over. He was lieutenant governor. He has been fighting the Democratic legislature in the state of Arkansas. He's up for re-election, heavily favored. His approval ratings are stratospheric in Arkansas. Guy's 42 years old. He has a stake in the Republican future. Let me just tell you one thing he said that stuck with me. And it's one of those things that I've just been thinking about a great deal. He said, there's a temptation in this job when you're governor of a state to think that it's the most important thing in the world. He says it's not. There are people who've been governor before me. Yeah, people like Bill Clinton and Jim Guy Tucker. But he says there are people who've been governor before me, and there are lots of people who'll be governor after me. But there's another job where I'm the only person who can do it. I'm the only person who can be husband to my wife, who can be father to my 3 children. There's not going to be anybody else to do that job. That's the most important job for every one of us. And frankly, with some politicians, they could say those words and it wouldn't come across. With Mike Huckabee of Arkansas, it makes a real difference. If you can, give a listen to this guy. He is a pleasure to listen to because, you know what, when it comes to using television, when it comes to using words and communication skills, much better than the great communicator, William Jefferson Clinton. The only problem with Mike Huckabee, he comes from a little town in Arkansas called Hope. Yeah, he does come from Hope, Arkansas. Sorry, but Bill Clinton doesn't really. He left Hope when he was a kid. His family his mother moved to Hot Springs. But Mike Huckabee really does come from Hope, and then he was a pastor for some years before going into politics. Anyway, we go to your calls. We go to Leah in Rochester, Minnesota. Leah, you're on the EIB radio network.
Thank you for taking my call. My comment is, I was supposed to do this quickly, is about Ross Perot, and I find it amazing that people will, that this guy comes out of the woodwork, it seems like every 2 to 4 years, tells us what a wonderful thing he can do for this country and what his people can do, blah, 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 on and on. And people listen to him, and he's taken seriously.
Not anymore.
Well, I would hope not, because every time he comes around and, you don't see him ever again to work for anything that he wants, like the balanced budget. He did nothing, but yet, he's got plenty of criticism, but, he's never there for any of the work. He just complains.
No, exactly. It's one of those things where, look, he is making one very important point here, and one where I think you have to give Mr. Perot credit, is he is taking the point that this balanced budget agreement is in many ways a fraud because it doesn't deal with the Social Security issue. I mean, if you didn't count the money that people were paying into Social Security, and if you took that money out of the budget and put it aside so we would use it later as we need it, we wouldn't be anywhere close to a balanced budget. Would be $66 billion further away. And Ross happens to be right on that. But the fact that he's not serious is absolutely demonstrated by his being not a participant in any way on issues of campaign finance reform, which he says are important, in going after the president of the United States and trying to get some of this information out there, or talking about legislation, or, as you say, even talking about the balanced budget agreement, which he said was his first priority. I think it's pretty obvious that Mr. Perot is, as they say, not for real, and maybe several enchiladas short of a combination plate. I mean, let's face it. Thanks very, very much for your call. We go to Harry in Shippensburg, Pennsylvania. Harry, you're on the EIB radio network.
How you doing, Mike?
Hanging in there.
I think the word's unstable for Ross Perot. Bob Dole was on right after Perot appeared, and Bob Dole indicated that Perot that told him that he was going to join up with the Dole campaign. They just had a few details to work out. 4 hours later, Ross Perot reneged on the agreement. In effect, he's helped elect Bill Clinton twice. Look at what happened in '92. He was doing good in the polls. He withdrew, and then, 2 or 3 months later, came back in. I mean, the guy is a fruitcake here, and for any of our conservative friends to place any stock in this man, I think is extremely dangerous.
I couldn't agree with you more. Look at the record. Look at some of the things he has sworn occurred. Visitations from mysterious government agents, that whole thing about George Bush trying to disrupt his daughter's wedding.
Oh, that was crazy. That was crazy.
It was. And look, I want to tell you something. Try to imagine that Ross Perot didn't have the $3 billion, but you just encountered him on a park bench and listened to him. He would be an entertaining nut, which is, I think, exactly the way that...
Was it Bellevue in New York, the place?
Well, we have a Bellevue in Washington.
You've done a great job filling in for Rush, and I'd just like to say, people have used this mind-numb robot thing about the people that listen to the show. I listen to Rush more because he agrees with what's in my heart. And, for years, all we had was the major networks, and we were getting a straight liberal line, and it is just so satisfying to hear a man come out like Rush who can articulate the conservative position, and it means so much to so many of us. And Mike, you continue to do a good job filling in for him, and I appreciate that.
Hey, I appreciate your kind words. Thanks. With what he's talking about there, I often get the image. Do you remember back in the Cold War, we had something called Voice of America. We had Radio Free Europe. And literally, and I know this to be true because I've been over to Poland and I've talked to people, there were people who would, in their basements, have these sort of secret little radios where they would be able to escape the mind-numbing, government-sponsored, imposed lies of the establishment. And they'd be able, on a crackling little sound, to pick up the dim, distant voice of the truth. Voice of America, Radio Free Europe. I'm not trying to say it's the same kind of thing or that Bill Clinton presides over an evil empire, but don't you sometimes feel it's kind of similar? You have such enormous power in the mainstream media, but we gather with hopefulness and the flame of freedom to listen to Radio Free Rush on the EIB network. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the EIB network. This week.
Michael Medved back with you, sitting in today for Rush Limbaugh. There's a piece. I mean, again, I am still somewhat mystified why there seems to be so much gloom among so many conservatives. And there was a wonderful piece in the American Spectator this month, the new November issue, by Mark Stein, who I've never met, but he's one of the funniest writers on the conservative side. Listen to what he says. He says, "Why are conservatives such a bunch of losers? If you followed the recent special editions of the Weekly Standard, the Conservative Crack-Up, Conservative Crack-Up 2, Conservative Crack-Up meets Abbott and Costello, Conservative Crack-Up the musical, you probably suspect it's all a cunning plot to reposition the conservative movement as America's latest victim class, eligible for affirmative action programs, or at the very least, an edition of Ricky or Sally Jesse. On today's show, ferocious right-wing bastards now riddled with self-doubt." I think it's funny writing. And then he has another piece where he describes one of the speakers at this conservative summit that took place in Washington's Mayflower Hotel. Here's what he says. "I was at the back of the room, and the fellow speaking was staring at his shoes, so I didn't have a clear view. But by the time he got to the bit about freedom being one of the most precious of life's freedoms, I assumed he was some high school valedictorian who'd won the assignment in a competition. Instead, it proved to be one of the congressional leaders. Those who are relying on Gore's woodenness to lose the next election had better watch out. Woodenness seems to be the one area where Republicans can hold their own. You can have the best policies in the world, but if these are the fellows you entrust them to, good luck. You can't see the planks for the wood." It is a problem. We go to your calls. We go to George in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. George, how you doing?
I'm fine, Michael. How you doing?
Hanging in there.
Good. I'm glad to join you in our little ride in Rush's Lamborghini today.
Thank you.
I'm calling from Pittsburgh, where we have a vote tomorrow on what is called the Regional Renaissance Initiative. This initiative has been marketed and fairly well by the Democratic Party as the stadium tax, meaning that if we vote for it, we will keep our sports teams being the Pirates and the Steelers. If we don't, they'll go to greener pastures.
And wait, would this new stadium, would they tear down Three Rivers Stadium?
Well, that's the odd part about it. They're talking about building a new football and a new baseball stadium, and there's really been no plan for Three Rivers, which incidentally still has a $45 million debt.
In other words, they wouldn't tear it down and replace Three Rivers?
No, they'd go to a little bit further into the north side of town and build two brand new stadiums on two new sites.
How much is this going to cost the people of Pittsburgh?
Well, they're talking about going in Allegheny County. It's weird. There's 11 counties which will vote on this tomorrow. It's not an all-or-nothing deal. It's a county-by-county deal. So, for instance, Allegheny County, which has 7% now, and its surrounding counties, which have 6%, Allegheny County is the only one that is even close to voting yes. It was 60% opposed, 30% for yesterday, but they're really rallying today towards passing this thing. But my whole point of this is that Rick Santorum is for this, and he has positioned himself as pro-Pennsylvania and pro-business. Higher taxes will not help the region.
What taxes, what kind of tax hike would they use to pay for this?
Well, this is a sales tax.
It would be like a penny extra?
It would be a half-cent extra. It would be a half point. But we've already gone up from 6 to 7%, and that was, quote, a temporary tax. It's never gone away, nor will this one.
You see, in general, I take it you're anti-stadium. You would not vote for it.
Oh, I'm not anti-stadium.
You just don't want the government to pay for it.
The means by which they want to do this are ludicrous. I think what they want to do to keep jobs, to keep a renaissance going on here in Pittsburgh is wonderful. But I think there is private funding. I travel quite a bit, and I go to St. Louis, and I see Busch Stadium and TWA Center. And we have Heinz. We have many, many corporate headquarters here, and I just don't think that they're rattling the bushes enough to get somebody to ante up.
Well, let me tell you what happened here in Seattle, because, again, we've had, I think there's so many cities. I know they just had a vote in San Francisco that passed very narrowly. Here in Seattle, we passed a vote on the football stadium very, very narrowly. And I was for it, but I was for it because it involved tearing down the Kingdome. And the Kingdome was a turkey building which had a huge debt on it. It had $70 million worth of debt on it. And basically, the Kingdome, with the Seahawks gone, would go unused. It would be an empty building. It would be a burden on the taxpayer. So I saw building a new stadium as actually being less costly and less destructive in the long run than being stuck. But if you're going to be stuck anyway with a Three Rivers Stadium that you're paying money on, I think the entire thing is really a shame, because what you find is a tremendous number of very selfish, sometimes very exploitative owners who use the threat of moving a beloved team away and tend to get what they want. And what's sad about it is in many places, they will lose a first vote, and then they come back and they win a second vote, or they go around the people. So don't think that if this gets voted down tomorrow, it necessarily will be dead. In other cities, it sort of comes back. It's like Dracula rising every morning at dawn.
I just don't understand, Michael, why somebody who is going to run a business, which is a sports business, can tell the taxpayers, I need a new manufacturing plant to do what I do.
Well, see, here's the argument that people would make, and we've got to go to a break, and I appreciate your call. The argument people would make is one of those stadiums is not just for the sports business. It can be used. Here in Seattle, they were building an exhibition center as well. In other words, it becomes a long-term public asset. And you can kind of see that. Promise Keepers can come there. Other organizations can come there. But by the same token, when there's so much revenue from television rights and from associated merchandise, it does seem bizarre, doesn't it, that some successful franchises simply can't make a go of it without governmental support. We'll be right back. Michael Medved sitting in for Rush on the EIB Network.
You're listening to the EIB Network.
Michael Medved here with you on the EIB Radio Network, sitting in today for Rush Limbaugh. Needed to take a personal day today. And we will go directly back to your calls. Next hour, the gender gap. What can we do about it? Why is it there? Why is it even there with unarousing Democratic candidates? We go first to John in Greensville. We go to Jerry in Cincinnati, Ohio. I listened to Bo Snerdley, and Bo Snerdley says, Jerry, you're on.
Yeah, this is Jerry.
Hi.
Hi. I was just listening to all the talk about the stadium taxes.
Yep.
In Cincinnati here, we had a stadium taxes on the ballot, I think it was last year. The Bengals wanted a new stadium, and it went through, but now they're changing the deal on us. Yeah.
It's very, very tough. People love the sports teams.
Oh, I voted for it.
And yet sometimes these owners, you want a referee in there to call a penalty.
Yeah. It's been in the papers and everything. They're saying Mike Brown's holding us hostage. And then all of a sudden the Bengals, of course, finally had a win this Sunday. They haven't won in forever. But, the cost, I don't know the exact number, but it's like he added $100 million or something.
Now, in Cincinnati, is there some nice way you could blame this on Marge Schott?
No.
You can't?
Marge is still waiting her turn to figure out a red stadium. But the deal with the Bengals stadium is they're only going to use it 8 Sundays a year or however many, and they didn't want to put a dome on it, so it had to be exactly the way he wanted it, and now the price is going up and up. Well, we forgot we got to buy this land, and we got to do that.
Well, again, look, it is one of those things where there are so many cities, and each situation is different. We will be right back on the EIB network.
That's all for now. Tune in tomorrow for more broadcast excellence with me, Rush Limbaugh, right here on the Armed Forces Radio Network.
Plant a tree, now is the time to recognize a tree for all that it is worth.
This is John Denver speaking for the... It's all a cunning plot to reposition the conservative movement as America's latest victim class, eligible for affirmative action programs, or at the very least, an edition of Ricky or Sally Jesse. On today's show, ferocious right-wing bastards now riddled with self-doubt. I think it's funny writing. And then he has another piece where he describes one of the speakers at this conservative summit that took place in Washington's Mayflower Hotel. Here's what he says. I was at the back of the room, and the fellow speaking was staring at his shoes, so I didn't have a clear view. But by the time he got to the bit about freedom being one of the most precious of life's freedoms, I assumed he was some high school valedictorian who'd won the assignment in a competition. Instead, it proved to be one of the congressional leaders. Those who are relying on Gore's woodenness to lose the next election had better watch out. Woodenness seems to be the one area where Republicans can hold their own. You can have the best policies in the world, but if these are the fellows you entrust them to, good luck. You can't see the planks for the wood. It is a problem. We go to your calls. We go to George in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. George, how you doing?
I'm fine, Michael. How you doing?
Hanging in there.
Good. I'm glad to join you in our little ride in Rush's Lamborghini today.
Thank you.
I'm calling from Pittsburgh, where we have a vote tomorrow on what is called the Regional Renaissance Initiative. This initiative has been marketed and fairly well by the Democratic Party as the stadium tax, meaning that if we vote for it, we will keep our sports teams being the Pirates and the Steelers. If we don't, they'll go to greener pastures.
And wait, would this new stadium, would they tear down Three Rivers Stadium?
Well, that's the odd part about it. They're talking about building a new football and a new baseball stadium, and there's really been no plan for Three Rivers, which incidentally still has a $45 million debt.
In other words, they wouldn't tear it down and replace Three Rivers?
No, they'd go to a little bit further into the north side of town and build two brand new stadiums on two new sites.
How much is this going to cost the people of Pittsburgh?
Well, they're talking about going in Allegheny County. It's weird. There's 11 counties which will vote on this tomorrow. It's not an all-or-nothing deal. It's a county-by-county deal. So, for instance, Allegheny County, which has 7% now, and its surrounding counties, which have